Meeting to order. If we can please rise for a moment of reflection and the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call the roll, please.
Ms. Franzen.
Here.
Mrs. Hoover.
Here.
Ms. Royce, I am here. Mrs. Bowling.
Here.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Here.
Mr. Gerton.
Here.
Mr. Brady.
Here. Thank you. We have all members present this evening. On to amendments of agenda. There is only one, and that is to remove the DEI Advisory Board meeting report. Mrs. Franzen.
I move we amend the agenda as stated.
Motion to amend the agenda as stated. Mrs. Hoover.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Hoover. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
Ms. Royce, I will vote yes. Mrs. Bowling.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Gerton.
Yes.
Mr. Brady.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Next on the agenda, we have two sets of minutes. We have the minutes from the April 3rd regular meeting and the April 29th special meeting. What's your pleasure? Mr. Gerton,
Make the motion to file the minutes.
to accept the minutes as if read.
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion to accept the minutes as if read.
Thank you. Mrs. Franzen,
I second.
seconded by Mrs. Franzen. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
Ms. Royce, I will vote yes. Mrs. Bowling.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Gerton.
Yes.
Mr. Brady.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Moving on to special presentations, we have Clint Zimmerman with the Public Works Annual Report.
Give me just 1 second here. Excuse me. Hello, my name is Clint Zimmerman, Superintendent of Public Works for the City of Norwood. I'm here to give a small, concise annual report as far as what Public Works does on a daily basis, staff we have, equipment, things like that. Starting off, Public Works Department consists of 5 different departments totaling 17 full-time employees. We do augment that with 4 seasonal employees to help cut grass and weed eat throughout the summer. Those seasonal employees are only here for about 12 weeks total. Excuse me. We represent about 5.5% of the annual budget as far as personnel costs for the city of Norwood in terms of the 2023 budget. We'll go down through each department individually. The Parks Department is, the lead man is Leo Osterday. He is they're responsible for, I'm sorry, I can't see my slide without turning to the right. We're responsible for 12 parks. We cut roughly 108 acres of land on a regular basis. That's all the parks, city ball fields, on off ramps, city lots. We also maintain, when there's a complaint to the health department, if there's an individual yard that's not getting cut and the grass gets too high, then there's orders that come out from the health department. The health department then gives us the orders if they have not been fulfilled. We go out and cut those premises and then send notice back to the health department. Health department then bills the homeowner for that. They also remove and trim trees inside the right-of-way. They're in charge of cleaning up all the bathrooms and the shelters before and after parks rentals. They also are the main ones that hang the holiday lighting. They help out with snow and ice control and the leaf control. This is all done by 4 full-time employees. The next department would be the streets department. The streets department also has 4 employees. That represents roughly 1.3% of the general budget for 2023. Responsible for pothole repair. Yes, we do pothole repair. We do a lot of pothole repair. Okay. Unfortunately, trying to take care of some of the deferred maintenance, let's call it, that has gone on for the past decades, I mean plural decades, is not something that we can just take care of overnight. We do not have the manpower or the resources to repave and rebase the street. So it is a small scale repair using a heated asphalt trailer. We have 1 trailer. Those 4 employees, on top of taking care of the pothole repair, are also in charge of the storm sewer maintenance. Storm sewer collapses, rebuilding of catch basins, things of that nature. They also do your fall leaf cleanup from October to roughly October to December of every year. I think we had, can't remember how many, I should have put that on here, how many cubic yards of leaves we removed, but it was, I think, 108.
1,800, it says.
1,800 cubic yards of leaves picked up from the city streets. 4 employees. It's a lot of work. These guys put a lot of work in, as does every department. The next department would be the paint and sign department. We have 2 employees in the paint and sign department, representing just over 0.5% of the city budget for 2023. They paint the crosswalks and the skip lines, in charge of graffiti removal, maintenance of large events for street closures, traffic when we shut down, when we are the ones that actually shut down 562 and doing lane changes for trash cleanup, right-of-way cleaning and stuff like that. They're the ones that basically set off all the cones, road detours, things like that. Repair and replacement of city signage, street signs, no parking signs, things like that. They're the ones that put up the handicap parking signs if you have something like that. That happens. Maintenance of traffic lights and controls. There are some things within the traffic lights that are just, you cannot get the parts to fix some of those. Sometimes we do have to farm some of that out to a company called Capital Electric if it's something that we can't fix in-house. But we try to fix everything that we can, obviously. The next department would be the garage department. We have 2 employees for the city garage, and they work on everything in the city fleet, from chainsaws to police cruisers, except for some of the larger specialty equipment like the fire department ladder trucks. Sometimes that takes a specialized knowledge for that. They also help out with the snow and ice control, but they're usually working on trucks, because we've got about 3 to 4 trucks that actually do the salt removal for the city of Norwood, and keeping those things up and running is not an easy task sometimes. And the last department we'll go over is the water department. The numbers on this are slightly off just because I can't separate out the people that also work in the billing office. But if you take into account all the people in the billing office and the people that work out of the public works department, it represents about 2.3% of the general budget for 2023. These guys maintain roughly 60 miles of water main, about 6,500 individual service lines and meters, all the valves that are in the street, hydrant repair replacement. They're the frontline defense for water quality for the city of Norwood, maintaining that the city that we take in is maintained in a high standard and delivered safely to the houses for end use. They're also in charge of maintaining all of our records for the GIS system, which is basically how we keep track of work orders, things like that. I can go back several years and be able to show you where we did a repair, what kind of repair was done. A lot of times we take pictures there, so if you can't remember exactly how something ran, we've got an actual picture. We can go back and archive it. It's a vital tool to where we want to be in the future here. They're also in charge of marking utilities for the, like when you call underground, we go out and mark our water utility because we're the only ones that really have access to the records to be able to go out and do that. Winterize and spring hookup for the bathroom facilities and parks. And that's the end for the departments as a whole. And some of the equipment that we have available for us to be able to accomplish the work of the city. We have 1 case backhoe. We have 3 large dump trucks. We should have a 4th one by the end of the year this year. There's 2 new ones that will, once we get this other new one, that'll be 2 new ones, and then 2 other ones that are 2007 models. Those are the trucks that we do snow and ice removal with, and also leaf control. Walk behind paint machine, various mowers, sewer rotting machine. We did purchase a Bobcat in 2023 and a Gator, I believe, in 2022 for maintenance of the baseball fields. They have to be dragged, lined, things like that. Something else I forgot to mention for the Parks Department, they also paint and line all your soccer fields, baseball fields, drag, things like that, maintenance of sports fields. Accomplishments out of the Public Works Department, not just for the guys at Public Works, but just Public Works in general coming out of our office. Water meter replacement program, we got to a 95% completion rate. We still have some stragglers out there we're going to have to work on with either dealing with houses were vacant, damage to a curb valve, or substandard plumbing inside the home. Those things have racked up to out of just under 7,000 services. Roughly about 300 of those are going to need to be addressed going forward by us. But we did reach 95% completion rate. We've repaired several storm sewer issues, assets. If everybody remembers when the Forest Avenue underpass was closed down, that was a major issue that we had to deal with that we were not planning for, which is usually how storm issues come up. We are not, we're not planning on doing them, but we put the things in motion that need to happen and find a way to get it done. That one actually involved a $300,000 grant from the OPWC to finish that out, because that $200,000 project turned into a $500,000 project within hours once we got it excavated. That was a large project. The management and resurfacing of Varlman. We did finish the water upgrades that the water towers are no longer a part of the system. Those have been removed. That was part of the orders handed down by the director of the EPA. We've met those. We are now no longer underneath those orders. And instead of having a license or a conditional license to operate, we now just have a regular license to operate with no conditions. We work with ODOT, especially on the 562 project and the 561, which is Smith Road and Carthage Road, that's being done this year as well. We did not do that on purpose. Just for anybody that's heard that rumor. We lobbied for a long, long time to try to make sure that those projects did not overlap. And some things happened at the ODOT level where the Brent Spence Bridge was fast-tracked, which basically made them shift all their timelines for all of their projects. So we ended up with what we ended up with because of that. It wasn't, we lobbied and tried to make sure that these two didn't overlap because we knew it was probably going to be a pain. But that's the way it washed out. And goals for the coming year is to provide additional safety training to the guys down at Public Works. That's something that we really want to make a priority for this coming year. Succession planning. We've got a lot of guys that are going to be walking out roughly the same time. So the brain drain that's going to happen is going to be significant, and trying to make sure that we have the right things in place and the right people in the right places for when people start to retire is going to be key, especially over the next 5 years. Our lead and copper rule deadline for October for inventory of the water system and individual services, and anything that we know where we know what the pipe material is that has to be cataloged and turned in through the EPA. We're going to continue to monitor the water department revenues and expenditures so we can allocate additional funds for replacing water infrastructure where and when we can. Resource additional equipment to help us be more effective, because as I said, we've only got 17 guys over 5 departments. And if you're going to maintain a manpower like that fairly low, sometimes specialized equipment is the best way to be as effective as you can in maintaining a low manpower. And finally, the Montgomery Road pedestrian improvements and resurfacing that is scheduled for later this year and 2025 is going to be a big thing on our radar for this year. And finally, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Mrs. Hoover?
Thank you, sir. Through the president, I'm curious if there's an update on the timing of the lateral and Carthage and Smith, when that will be, if we have new updates on when to expect paving to happen on those.
What I can tell you is nothing has formally changed. Ryan Blake from the EPA from the ODOT canceled our regularly scheduled meeting for today, so I didn't get any updates on the 562 project per se. I can tell you we were hoping that the actual resurfacing of Smith and Carthage was going to be happening probably this summer or earlier this spring. Because of the lateral, ODOT is concerned about getting, or I guess the contractor is concerned about getting their trucks in here to be able to do that. So it looks like the actual milling and paving for Smith and Carthage probably won't happen until October.
October,
Yeah.
okay. But that is just your best guess.
But hopefully by October, the lateral will be back up and open. So they're supposed to, as long as they don't have to postpone it, because as you can see, weather has definitely played an issue this past week. They were supposed to finish all the paving earlier. They were going to pave at night, but things just didn't work out for them weather-wise. But they're shooting to be open on the 23rd of this month. That may end up getting delayed. I'm waiting to hear from ODOT.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. We have no public hearings tonight. Moving on to request to address council. There are 4 of them. And the first one is Charlene Myers.
Pardon me, let me.
I'll just go ahead. I'm gonna just pick. Can I pass these around to you guys? Is that okay? You can get them out to folks. You can start my clock.
All right.
Okay, so I'm Charlene Myers, as you all know, and I work at Focus Cincinnati, and we have been doing now meals at Christ the Savior Church of 4285 Ashland Avenue for now 4 or 5 months. We're up to like 61 patrons each time, so we're likely to move forward with doing 2 meals a month really soon, probably maybe in July or August, so that's kind of exciting. We have our food pantry going where we see upwards of like 20 clients, and that's once a month. It'll be this Saturday. We applied for, well, before I go there, we are also connecting, thanks to Mary, with Norwood View School, and so we're doing, providing snacks for their 5th grade graduation to connect with parents. We are going to do a backpack kind of promotion, and we're also doing a giving tree. So we would definitely love to see some of you out, especially when we do that giving tree, because it'll be a meal at Christ the Savior, and then we're going to give I know how to get the parents in the door. I was a principal for a number of years, and actually Sam's assistant principal, as we discussed earlier. And the way to get the parents in the door is to give their kids presents. So that's what we're doing. And hopefully, we'll get to see you there. I also applied for a Do Good grant, which I'll hear about tomorrow, hopefully, and hopefully it goes well. And the Do Good grant is from Joe Burrows Foundation, and we're looking to do a pretty good project feeding people in colder weather more frequently. So when I get more information about that, I will definitely present that to you guys. And I didn't see the timer, so I think I'm good.
You're good.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you.
All right. And our next request to address council is it Kelsey Goins?
Hi, good evening. My name is Kelsey Goins. I'm here on behalf of the Hamilton County Commission on Women and Girls Pay Equity Committee, as I serve as the women's chair. We also have a girls' chair. But the committee wants to thank you for committing to signing the Pay Equity Pledge for the city of Norwood. And just to provide some more context on the commission, the Hamilton County Commission on Women and Girls is a commission under the direction of Commissioner Denise Driehaus and her program director, Mary Monty. The purpose of the Commission on Women and Girls is to make recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners in local government jurisdictions to eliminate any distinction, exclusion, or restriction made on the basis of sex, which has the effect of impairing or nullifying the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise by women, irrespective of marital status, on the basis of equality between men and women, of human rights or fundamental freedom in the political, economic, social, cultural, civic, or any other field. The Commission promotes and encourages women to seek leadership positions in society while also helping girls develop leadership skills. In April 2023, while filling out my application to be a part of the Commission, the committee that stood out to me most was pay equity. I was passionate for pay equity for a myriad of reasons, most importantly because I am a woman and also a leader in the community where I oversee inclusion and equity work on a day-to-day basis. I focus, I already have that, sorry. I'm able to oversee inequities within pay, so I wanted to solve the problem. So this committee felt incredibly personal and also allows for me to work towards solving the problem daily. And just to provide some data, according to education data in 2022, 12% of women earned advanced degrees, while only 8% of men were earning advanced degrees. And even with women having a 4% increase for advanced degrees, we are still earning 83% of what men are paid. And also we know for women of color, and specifically Black and Hispanic, it is even greater. But in addition to the pledge, we're also providing additional resources for girls and women to build the confidence to ask the questions for more pay, whether it is negotiating pay for a new role or asking for a raise in current positions, and also just receiving increased compensation. Being a part of this committee has been empowering. I've been able to work along 5 amazing women and girls, and most importantly, see our girls, who I hope we will have some Norwoodians next year, become more confident, more knowledgeable, and change agents within the community. With these 5 women and girls, I believe we are closer to living in a world where pay equity is the norm, and Hamilton County being the champion. As a Norwood resident of 3 years, I'm excited to present the City of Norwood with a certificate of commitment. I'm ecstatic to live in a community where we're making pay equity a priority, and I'm incredibly proud of the work that we have done thus far. Thank you again for your commitment.
Thank you. Our next request to address council is Bishop Sonny James.
First of all, let me say good evening to each and every one of you and to all of our wonderful residents and citizens in Great Norwood, Ohio. I stand before you tonight. My youngest son, Lemuel, is now 6 days in the Middle East and already has had 2 altercations. And I want to, first of all, say to all of the families in our community that have family members that are doing wonderful work, they were supposed to start off as a simple training drill to get word that there's some altercations right where he is. So we just want to send out prayers, not just to my son, but to all of the families in our great community that that have folks over there doing simple drills or doing non-so-simple drills. So our heart goes out to that. I'm so glad to hear about pay equity. I actually was watching a report on Venus Williams years ago, and that was one of her biggest charges, to endorse that. I wanted to come tonight. I was in a clergy meeting addressing some very serious issues that affect people of color, and but I had to leave so that I could come here tonight because I was so impressed. I was in the police department just about a week ago, and Marilyn Hanrahan's sister and the other female staff member there really impressed me. There was an African-American man that came in and he had to address a matter. And I was sitting there and trying not to be nosy, if that's possible. But the way they handled the gentleman was so impressive. It was just wonderful. It was so wonderful, in fact, that after he left out of the building, I had to approach the window and basically I said, wow. You know, with all the stuff that you hear about Norwood, what we're not hearing enough of are those fine hidden gems of the Highland, where people are really going out of their way to treat people fairly and to treat people with respect. And I don't know if they're watching right now, but I told both of those ladies I was thoroughly impressed. And before the young man left out, I said, excuse me. I said, son, come over here. He said, yes, sir. I said, now listen, I want you to go and tell everybody you know how great Norwood is. And he said, yes, sir. Yes, sir. And he was so captivated by their protocol and everything else. Then a few nights ago, I was called to one of our local bars, late night, for folks using the N-word. And one of our young officers showed up. And I want to compliment our chief, because I believe things that happen with change happen because those that sit in leadership make it a priority to do something different. And that young man came and he was so respectful. It was kind of a heated situation, but he was so amazing. I had to really shake his hand afterwards, and it made me just think about how far we've come as a community. And so I want to just say to each of you that sit in these seats and that you serve, you know, I'm seeing some real awesome things here in the community. And I'm seeing how, I remember when Ms. Royce was talking about a woman who served in this community, and she began to cry. And I thought, my God, this is supposed to be a business meeting, but yet her heart goes out before her. And I thought, my God, one day when I grow up, I want to be just like her. And I just want to compliment each of us as we're moving forward. We are going to be bringing some leaders into this community, and we are not coming in to challenge. I'm bragging and I'm saying, come on to Norwood. And even tonight in the meeting, they were like, Bishop, now you know. And I said, hush your mouth. Norwood is one of the best communities you can see. So we're going to make a plan to come and do some touring and showcase some of the businesses and even you all. And so I just wanted to come tonight to say, I'm so proud of Norwood. Even though most people think when I show up, I'm going to run the clock over, which I don't know what time it is. First time in years, I haven't seen the sunny clock going. I don't know. But
It's on here.
Oh, okay,
You're at 8
thank you.
seconds.
Oh, okay. So I just wanted to say I'm so proud that we can be a family. And no way, that wasn't okay. So you're gone. But I just want to say thank God for Norwood, Ohio. Let's keep growing.
Thank you.
I think you sped that.
I did not. I didn't touch it. Our next request to address council is Catherine Torrin-Jones.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you for just a few minutes about the library and what we're coming up against here with summer reading. It's going to be in line with, more in line with what Governor DeWine has in mind for a literacy push that he and his wife are focusing on for our state. And I'm excited to say that we'll have a kickoff party at the library at the Norwood branch on June 1st at 2 o'clock. We'll have our best children's librarian and our youth librarian there to do crafts and have ice cream, June 1st, 2 o'clock. So that should be really fun. We're going to be focusing on children and teens all the way through the age of 18. There'll be activities for all ages throughout the summer. If you want to check our website, chpl.org. But another thing that I can bring to you this year that's new, we have our homework helper who has been really building up a nice, good group of kids after school that have been working with her every day on their homework. And we have seen anecdotally some improved grades, and it's been really fun. Every quarter, at the end of the quarter, we have a pizza party where the kids who have been regularly coming, they have goals, and if they meet the goals, we get to have a pizza party with them. Our homework helper is named Bella, and luckily for us this year, she's going to remain throughout the year. She's not a seasonal employee this time. So Monday through Thursday at 3:30, we'll have like drop-in programming for the whole month of June and July. It'll be just simple things, but things that we can get the kids interacting and keeping up their engagement over the summer, puzzles and board games, Lego and STEM activities and things like that. So that's something I'm really looking forward to as well. So I hope everybody can come out to the library. Summer reading lasts from June 1st to July 31st, and there's a little something for all the kids and teens. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Moving on to reports of standing committees of council. First is a committee of the whole meeting from May 7th, 2024. To the Honorable Council of the City of Norwood, Ohio, we, your committee of the whole, to whom was referred Financial Recovery Plan, Master Plan for the City, New Council Orientation, Standing Operating Procedures, and Community Survey, beg leave to submit the following report. There was nothing new to discuss or share regarding a new council orientation. This topic will remain in committee of the whole for ongoing discussion and development. There was discussion about standard operating procedures, SOPs for council. 2 items to be included are placing items into and reporting out of committee and proper notification by council members when they will be absent from a council or a committee meeting. This topic will also remain in committee of the whole for ongoing discussion and development. There was lengthy discussion about the topic of a community survey. The survey will contain 10 to 15 questions, which does not include any demographical questions. Several members of council are interested in assisting with the development of the survey. Several other community surveys were provided as examples of structure, format, as well as questions asked. There was discussion about having surveys created prior to the Norwood Day Parade, printed surveys distributed for residents to complete, and QR codes posted along the parade route, also in Norwood parks and local businesses, at public gathering places, Norwood City Schools, and in communications from the Norwood Chamber of Commerce. The July Committee of the Whole meeting will focus on and finalize the survey. This topic will remain in Committee of the Whole for ongoing discussion and development. Mr. Gerton, who placed the matter of financial recovery plan into committee, recommended removing it from committee since the financial recovery plan has already been passed by council. With regard to the master plan for the city, it was suggested to include grant requests for calendar year 2025. This should include which projects meet certain criteria and the deadlines to apply for the grant funding. This topic will also remain in committee of the whole for ongoing discussion and development. Respectfully submitted, Joe Gears, chairperson, Ms. Royce, Mrs. Franzen, Mrs. Hoover, Mrs. Bowling, and Mr. Gerton. Is there a motion to accept the committee report? Mrs. Hoover.
I make a motion, we accept the committee report as read.
Thank you. Is there Mrs. Bowling?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Bowling. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce? I will vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Gerton?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Next item on the agenda is a Small Business and Economic Development Committee meeting from May 9th of 2024.
To the Honorable Council of the City of Norwood, Ohio, we, your Committee of Small Business and Economic Development, to who was referred the CRA application for UDF, beg leave to submit the following report. Mr. Skelly and Ms. Fitzgerald spoke along with the factory supervisor who gave us details about the CRA application that would help to provide much overdue facility updates to the UDF facility. We collectively decided to support the CRA as it would add 5 to 7 full-time jobs and additional part-time employees as well. Respectfully submitted, Sam Bowling, chairperson, Mrs. Emily Franzen, Mr. Jeff Gerton, and Mrs. Susan Hoover was, due to a miscommunication, absent.
Thank you. Is there a motion to accept the committee report? Mrs. Franzen?
I move that we accept the committee report.
Motion by Mrs. Franzen to accept the committee report. Is there a second? Mr. Gerton?
I second the motion.
Seconded by Mr. Gerton. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce? I will vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Gerton?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Moving on to introductory readings of ordinances and resolutions. First item is an ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2024 and declaring an emergency. What's your pleasure? Mrs. Winterbauer.
I move we suspend the rules and have all three readings.
Motion by Mrs. Winterbauer to suspend the rules and have all three readings of the ordinance. Is there a second? Mr. Garten.
A second.
Seconded by Mr. Garten. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce? I vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Garten?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Please have all three readings of the ordinance.
Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2024 and declaring an emergency. Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2024 and declaring an emergency. Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2024 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Mrs. Winterbauer.
I move we pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mrs. Winterbauer to pass the ordinance. Is there a second? Mrs. Bowling.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Bowling. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce? I will vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Garten?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Next item on the agenda is an ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to sign the State Energy Project Grant Agreement for reimbursement of funds and declaring an emergency. What's your pleasure? Mrs. Hoover.
Move that we declare an emergency and have all three readings.
Motion by Mrs. Hoover to suspend the rules and have all three readings of the ordinance. Is there a second? Mr. Garten.
Second the motion?
Seconded by Mr. Garten. Any discussion? Mrs. Hoover.
I was wondering if we could have, I'm guessing Mr. Powers come and explain this for the folks at home, or would that be Mr. Hackworth? Mr. Hackworth, through the president?
Yes. Mr. Hackworth? Are you open for questions?
Didn't mean to put you on the spot, sir.
Okay.
I was just wondering if you could review for the folks at home what this is for.
Oh, this is for, this is a grant that was awarded to us from the state for basically just lighting for the community center, fire department, public works. Just, and it's a reimbursement grant that we have to fund, and then they send us the money back, basically.
Thank you.
To upgrade our lighting to LEDs rather than just normal, fluorescent stuff. Yeah.
Thank you. Mrs. Hoover?
Do we have a sense of how much savings that will give us down the road?
Well, they said about, they don't have my notes, but I think they said somewhere about 15%, I think it is.
Wonderful.
So, which is really a large number. You can have all the lighting we have.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Mr. Garten?
Mr. President, just to follow up with that question comment, it's a reimbursement for $247,000.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All right, motion on the floor by Mrs. Hoover, seconded by Mr. Garten, is to suspend the rules and have all three readings of the ordinance. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce? I will vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Garten?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Please have all three readings of the ordinance.
Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to sign the State Energy Project Grant Agreement for reimbursement of funds and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to sign the State Energy Project Grant Agreement for reimbursement of funds and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to sign the State Energy Project Grant Agreement for reimbursement of funds and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Is there a motion to pass the ordinance? Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Motion to pass the ordinance, please.
Motion by Mr. Braden to pass the ordinance. Is there a second? Mrs. Hoover.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Hoover. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Mr. Royce? I will vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Girton?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Moving on to the next item. It is an ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into an agreement with Hamilton County for a grant to complete the Elm Avenue Flood Elimination Project and declaring an emergency. Mrs. Bowling.
A motion that we suspend the rules and have all three readings of the ordinance.
Motion by Mrs. Bowling to suspend the rules and have all three readings of the ordinance. Mr. Braden.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Mr. Braden. Any discussion? Mrs. Bowling.
Can we invite Mr. Powers to come just give a brief summary of this brief, lengthy project?
Mr. Powers.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. So this would be a contract to allow ARPA funds to be transferred from the county to the city in support of the Elm Avenue Flood Reduction Project, which would create a detention basin that would allow the city to move the current detention basin in the middle of Elm Avenue to a much better location where it won't be running into people's cars, running into people's garages, climbing up their front steps. So the city does have funds committed to this as well, but this is kind of filling the rest of the funding that's necessary for the city to complete the project. There's a very tight timeline. In order to do this, we have to have everything appropriated and encumbered in 2024 under this contract. So that would be the end of October. We have to have this under contract. So you can expect for us to be back here in a few months putting that out to bid. Happy to answer any other questions.
Mrs. Hoover.
I have a question regarding how this will impact streets beyond Elm. Obviously, we know Elm has suffered intensely, but I know I was visiting a resident over on Franklin, and she also is having some pretty significant issues. So I'm curious how big an impact will this have for the surrounding, or is this really just going to help our folks on Elm?
So, standing out on the street, you're going to see it the most in the area on Elm. But the sewer system does or the storm sewer system rather, does kind of feed into that area. Off the top of my head, I can't tell you where all of that is running from, but I can tell you that it does run at least as far as the recreation center. So you would expect to see improvements at least from the high school area back toward Woodlawn.
Thank you.
Welcome. Yes.
Mrs. Franzen.
Has the city started to reach out to the folks that live on those roads that you'll need an easement to access the detention area?
Yes, we had. We had a meeting about a week and a half ago.
Okay.
We do have another meeting planned for this weekend. So we'll be putting out flyers for folks in the area to kind of let everybody know about that. And we'll be meeting more or less on the site so that we can kind of show everybody where this will be taking place at.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? All right.
Thank you, everyone.
The motion on the floor by Mrs. Bowling, seconded by Mr. Braden, is to suspend the rules and have all three readings of the ordinance. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce? I vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Girton?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Please have all three readings of the ordinance.
An ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into an agreement with Hamilton County for a grant to complete the Elm Avenue Flood Elimination Project and declaring an emergency. An ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into an agreement with Hamilton County for a grant to complete the Elm Avenue Flood Elimination Project and declaring an emergency. An ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into an agreement with Hamilton County for a grant to complete the Elm Avenue Flood Elimination Project and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Mrs. Bowling.
I move that we pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mrs. Bowling to pass the ordinance. Mrs. Hoover.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Hoover. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce? I will vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Girton?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Next item on the agenda is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a community reinvestment area agreement with United Dairy Farmers, Inc. regarding 1923 Williams Avenue and declaring an emergency. Mrs. Franzen.
I move that we suspend the rules and have all 3 readings.
Motion by Mrs. Franzen to suspend the rules and have all 3 readings of the ordinance. Mrs. Bowling.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Bowling. Any discussion? Mrs. Bowling.
Can we invite Ms. Fitzgerald up to speak
Yes.
through the president?
Ms. Fitzgerald.
Sure. Good evening. My name's Catherine Fitzgerald. I'm with Alloy Development and also consult with the City of Norwood for Economic Development Services. This is United Dairy Farmers plant here in Norwood. They're expanding their co-packing operation, which will require significant retrofitting to the current plant, requiring that the flooring be replaced and rebuilding the roof. They currently have 216 full-time employees in the City of Norwood and 21 part-time employees. They'll be adding 5 additional employees. They will make significant investment in real property, new construction, and improvements to the existing building of approximately $14.6 million. There will also be investment of $9.7 million in personal property that's not eligible, that is not taxed, so that is not part of the tax abatement. I would just like to be clear that the abatement is on the new investment. It is not on existing investment or existing that is here in Norwood. We do have Robert Butts, the plant manager, procurement manager, and contract packaging manager here, as well as Brittany Nichols from EY, the consultant for UDF. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Mr. Garten.
Sorry, no questions from Mrs. Fitzgerald.
All right.
But I do have a statement. We saw this in committee, and for anybody watching at home, they're adding on to the facility, and this is going to abate 50% of the 49% of the improvement, not of their current value. So this is, thank you for investing back in Norwood and keeping those jobs here. And it's a common sense thing in my perspective.
Thank you. Any additional discussion? All right. The motion on the floor by Mrs. Franzen, seconded by Mrs. Bowling, is to suspend the rules and have all 3 readings of the ordinance. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce? I will vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Girton?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Please have all 3 readings of the ordinance.
Ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a community reinvestment area agreement with United Dairy Farmers, Inc. regarding 1923 Williams Avenue and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a community reinvestment area agreement with United Dairy Farmers, Inc. regarding 1923 Williams Avenue and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a community reinvestment area agreement with United Dairy Farmers, Inc. regarding 1923 Williams Avenue and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Mr. Braden.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Motion to pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Braden to pass the ordinance. Mrs. Bowling.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Bowling. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce? I'll vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Girton?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. The last item here is a resolution creating U.S. playing card TIF fund and declaring an emergency. What's your pleasure? Mrs. Franzen.
I move that we suspend the rules and have all 3 readings.
Motion by Mrs. Franzen to suspend the rules and have all 3 readings of the resolution. Is there a second? Mrs. Winterbauer.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Winterbauer. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce? Yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Girton?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Please have all 3 readings of the resolution.
Resolution creating U.S. playing card TIF fund and declaring an emergency. Resolution creating U.S. playing card TIF fund and declaring an emergency. Resolution creating U.S. playing card TIF fund and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Is there, Mrs. Winterbauer?
I move to pass the resolution.
Motion by Mrs. Winterbauer to pass the resolution. Is there a second? Mrs. Franzen.
A second?
Seconded by Mrs. Franzen. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Mr. Royce? I will vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Girton?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Moving on to administration reports. Mayor Schneider,
Thank you, Mr.
your
President.
button.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let's see, I'll start out by talking about Mr. Hackworth's comments. Our project coordinator, Darren Hackworth, as he commented about this, the number went out there of $247,000. A $247,000 grant that they applied for. I don't think he patted himself on the back enough and the administration on the back enough to say, this is an improvement that's needed in the city. It's LED lighting, it's money that they went out and applied for and received. And now we can put this new lighting in, which we need new lighting all over the city anyways, but it's also cost efficient. It's energy efficient. So we'll see a payback through the time. So, Mr. Hackworth, you need to be a little bit more tooting your own horn and patting yourself on the back for that stuff instead of, and then the other one, we had Safety Service Director Powers come up and talk a little bit. And, again, he has worked hard to push this forward, to work with the Hamilton County, commissioners, and to try to get this going in the right direction for this Elm Avenue storm sewer stuff. And we're getting this ARPA funds. This isn't a drop in the bucket. This is over $1 million that we've went to Hamilton County and said, this is in our county and we need help with. And the commissioners have stepped up to help us. And it was with a lot of effort on their parts, and probably council members being involved in that also, making telephone calls and pushing to get this. But this is coming to our community. This is an incredibly, it's an incredible amount of work, and it's paying off. It's the efforts that these people are putting in place and council members are putting in place also. Over $1 million to hopefully eliminate a problem that has been plaguing this city for 60 years. Ever since they built where the creek used to be and put houses on top and infilled everything, this problem's been going on. So those are big, they're big projects. I had a note here to talk about the Saturday morning meeting. We're having another informational meeting. We had an informational meeting on what the city's plans are and how we're trying to eliminate this. Previously, we're having one, Saturday morning, 9 to 12, and this is in the community. We'll have a tent set up. There's flyers going out. Hopefully the community members will come down and meet and talk with us about it. We're hoping to have a brief presentation at 10 o'clock and then just be there and discuss things with them. That's prior to the off-pike market stuff going on. So you could go to that and then go to the off-pike market and have a ton of fun at Victory Park that day too. So those are big parts. Let's see. It was mentioned earlier the two people that work in the clerk of court's office. So Melissa Bishop is our clerk of courts, and then Carolyn Brinkmeyer, right? Carolyn Brinkmeyer is the other person that works in that. And those two do a phenomenal job, and that operation's been ran very well. You might recall that Andy Conlon resigned or retired at the end of the year, and then Melissa Bishop went in there. But they are great, and they do a great job. They're a face of the city, and I would agree with him that they do a great job. The Safety Service Director asked me to mention that the Center for Local Government, which you'll hear times called CLG, Center for Local Government is sort of the organization that provides resources for municipalities, smaller municipalities. But we've been a member with them for a little while now. And just recently, in our police training center, we have a interactive system that they use for training on justified use of force, justification for use of force, and not justified use of force. And it is a training setup that's there, and all of our officers are able to use it. I think Mr. Powers is going to send out an email opening that up. The police chief had talked about opening that up and letting some council members come and see that, and some other elected officials to see what kind of training is done there. So it's really great to have. So Clint, the superintendent of Public Works, did a fine job on telling us the information about Public Works. They get a lot done with minimal manpower. We've ran a lean operation within our Public Works Department. They get a lot done. I look at it and say, Clint has done a great job as a leader of that department and all the lead men and getting so much done on a regular basis when you talk about all the parkland and all the streets and all the work that's there. But kudos to our Public Works Department. And then the last part, I had Norwood Lateral on here. He sort of gave an update on that, but I'll talk about spring and the building department. I'll say to most of the community members, yeah, you got to get out there and cut your grass a little more often, because I know I'm cutting my grass, it seems like, more than I want to right now, but it's spring. But your neighbors who have long grass and they're not touching it at all, if it's really a problem, it is sort of the building department that will go out there and send them a letter and say, cut your grass. Look at your house. I would say that all the community members need to look at your house, because Mother Nature wreaks havoc on the exteriors of our homes through the winter. And please go ahead and fix it before we send a letter. Take a look at the things that need to be repaired and get those things taken care of, because they will start annual inspections. Now, the city of Norwood, we don't do 360. You'll hear people talk about a 360 inspection. Normally they're going on at homeowner associations. And a 360 is they go around your whole house and they want to make sure that whole thing looks right. Normally our stuff is driving by. It's anything that somebody can see from the sidewalk walking in your neighborhood. That's the stuff you absolutely need to be getting fixed. But you're, of course, going to take care of the back and the side of your home also. So go ahead and please, everybody, take a look at that stuff. A lot of it is complaint driven. When our guys go out, when the building department guys go out, it's because somebody has looked at something that needs taken care of, and we will work to help that person get those things done. And then See Click Fix is active, the app that we have in place, See Click Fix. So continue as you find issues within the city of Norwood, please go to the app and put them on there. It's a great way for us to track what we're getting accomplished, and it will really justify whether running this lean operation that we do at Public Works is really effective, or if we're just spinning wheels and we need to add somebody in a different department or do something in our staffing to make it work better. And that's really a tool through the See Click Fix is a way to grab that information. And then the survey that's going to go out, it'll be helpful to have some of that information come back into the city for all the council members and for the administration to look at it and say, yeah, here's areas that are of concern that we need to focus on. Because sometimes we do get sort of stuck in, we're in a rut, and we just see the things that have to be taken care of, and sometimes we need to put efforts out in other areas. So that it'll be interesting to see some of that information. That's really all I had. I had a note here to put a monitor on the table for the presenters too, but that's another time. So that's all I had. Thank you.
All right. Any questions for the mayor? All right. Mr. Bonzo.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Microphone.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Exciting things are happening. This is actually, I'm sure one of y'all will probably talk about this, but this is CNU week. So the Congress for the New Urbanism is having their conference here in Cincinnati. We have a legacy project that the mayor supported and many community members did, and but that's being talked about and discussed there. But I'm also a volunteer there, so that's why I was a few minutes late today, is because I was rushing back from downtown to get here. I do have some exciting news, though. Again, I think I talked about this last time, but the checks are getting deposited. So if you all, anybody that's filed their taxes, and there's been reports that in years past, it's taken some time to get them deposited. This year they should have all been done back at the end of April. But if you still have anybody that has a check out for any reason, just call our office, because that's not normal. So they're really doing a great job of getting them deposited. For example, so I was telling this to Councilmember Winterbauer a couple days ago, but our individual collections for April, so last year they were $342,000. This year they're $666,000. So some of that is like outreach, but some of that's also timing. Like we're getting the checks deposited faster because they hit the month that they get deposited, kind of on this report. So that's a big kudos to the staff that's in there and everybody that's working hard. So it's an exciting time there. The other thing that our office is responsible for, so we've got the tax side, we've got the treasury side. It's all about the banking, all about the bank reconciliation. So after much negotiating with the state on exactly what they're wanting to see on these reconciliation reports, we have them all done now. So the staff has worked really hard on that. So and not only do we have them done, we have extra access for you all from your council computers. You can access now the reconciliations in every bank statement, the full statements that feed into it, so that you all can see too and add them up on your own as well and kind of see how that balances. So it's just an extra level of transparency we're trying to provide to just ensure that we're, there's good practices and that there's good accountability for everybody. So if you have questions about those or questions about how to access them on your council computer, you can reach out to Tim Wagers. He should be able to help, or TA, since he's the one I think that set it up. But yeah, we're excited for the future, and that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Bonzo? All right, Mr. Miracle.
Thank you, Mr. President. A couple things to share with council this evening. Last month, we began sharing a budget spreadsheet with the Finance Committee, and we're almost finished with that. So hopefully by the end of the week, we'll be emailing that to you. We have also started adding notes. So when you go over the spreadsheet, you'll see some little yellow pop-ups there. So trying to anticipate some of your questions. We'll have that to you hopefully by the end of this week. And then at our Finance Committee meeting on the 23rd, we'll review that. So also had a Teams call with Anna Mary and Chris McCoy from the Auditor of State. As you know, I have submitted some drafts of policies and procedures. We had a call last week. We met for about an hour reviewing those. We do have some edits. Plan to get those back to them quickly, and then I've asked that they review those and get them back to us in a timely manner. The next step from there is to bring those to council for your approval. And as you may or may not know, these will hopefully satisfy 10 or more of the reported on accounting methods comments. And that's our goal, is to check these off as quickly as possible. I think just alone the purchasing policy, I think, accounts for 6 of those. And also the budget spreadsheet that we're reviewing, that covers 3. So we're trying to address each of these as quickly as possible and get them checked off the list. So then all they have to do is come and monitor those. So some activity going on there, good things. And I'll hopefully have some more answers for you in a couple weeks on the policies and procedures. That's all I have, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Miracle? Mrs. Hoover.
I'm just wondering if you can give us a sense of when the fiscal emergency might be wrapping to a close. It's like the longest kiss goodnight.
Very well said. Trying to get that done. My goal is to have it done this year. So this is why I'm trying to get everything to them as quickly as possible. We want to get this submitted, approved, things that have to come to council so that we can have these ordinances or resolutions, whatever, passed. So that's my goal, and I've expressed that to them many times. And what we want to do is, I'm asking questions now. How can we move this process? And part of the policies and procedures, there's quite a few that we check off with that. So I want to get them to them sooner rather than later, so they can come in here and make sure that we are following these when they do their audit. That might sound like a lofty goal, but I keep on pressing, put the full court press up.
I'd like to just thank you very much for all of your efforts in this. It's a huge task, and I appreciate your efforts.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Miracle? All right, Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. President. Really just the one, although I will note that Mr. Miracle knows what I'd like to see in the next appropriation ordinance, but I just wanted to make a note. It's the next thing is to be the well, after unfinished and new, which I never have any items, but I forget that there's stuff. But on the Trex transfer for birdies, I just want council to know that I sent an email to the attorney that forwarded this to us, letting them know, here's the problem, the building department with the zoning and the conditional use. I have not gotten any response. I don't know if they've reached out to the building department or not, but I just wanted to let you know that I had passed that back to them. And I want to thank Darren for the work that's going to be done soon in the law department. And we're looking forward to that a lot. I think that's about it. Thank you very much.
All right.
Unless
Thank
there's
you.
any questions.
Questions for Mr. Moore? All right, thank you. Moving on to unfinished business. Any unfinished business?
Anyone else? I have a few items. I don't know if you have the slideshows.
Are they
which
under unfinished or new?
I don't know what order you have them in. We need to work on
They're just there.
They're just there? Do you want to pull one up? Ooh, this one. This is super fun. This is under, I believe, didn't Mr. Gabbard mention this at?
Yes.
Another previous council meeting, so I believe we're okay. So this is super exciting. National Indoor Korfball Tournament. It's taking over, and Norwood is, as we know, the epicenter of all amazing things. And so there's going to be the national tournament here at our high school. It is a very unusual game with lots of running and a stick and a net in the center. So check that out. What else you got? Thank you, sir. This has got two on here. One is just volunteer opportunities in Norwood. May is Volunteer Appreciation Month, and I'm going to ask the city if they can put this online. I have a list of nonprofit agencies in Norwood that have volunteer opportunities and would love to have folks get more connected with those. Councilman Franzen, would you like to? I'd like to share, this is super exciting. We did talk at a previous council meeting, about the Landsman application. So the way that this works is communities put forth applications for projects in their community, and then the congressman chooses 15 of them to take up to the Ways and Appropriations Committee to be funded. And we put in several applications, the city of Norwood did. One was for the community center, one was for Millcrest Loop. The one that was selected to go on is the Doral Field revitalization, which is over $2 million towards Doral Field. So this will be an amazing project. We'll find out in the next few weeks if it is one that's selected. But last year, when Landsman took his 15, they were all selected to be funded. So the chances that Norwood will be getting this is very, very good. It is important for me to share the process of it because we have to have, and I shared this at the last council meeting, we have to have projects ready to go to say we want federal funds for this. And they can't be small, they have to be big. They have to be $800,000 to $3.45 million. So, for example, the community center one that I worked on was $1.03 million. We did not get selected, but the fact that Doral Field could get these big improvements means that we can use some of the funding to do other projects in Norwood. So again, this is not a done deal, but this is a huge accomplishment for Norwood. I want to thank Mr. Powers, worked very hard on this. PLK did a ton of work. I know that Mike Skelly worked on another project. So there are a lot of hands that were involved in this. And I hope that we can start doing this on a more regular basis and just have always have some projects that we're ready to put forth. That's it for those two. Thank you. Compost bin sale, we mentioned this before. This is also on the city website. The next time will be June the 2nd. I encourage folks to get to their compost sale, your compost bins. You'd be amazed how much you can divert out of your garbage with these things. And then some folks just simply compost and never use it. But you also can have some really amazing soil for your garden. And then the next item is Music on Mills. This is a collaboration with the Rec, with Gem of the Highlands, with Starlight Donut, Off Pike Market, Northwood Cidery. I'm forgetting some folks. Oh, Indian Mound Cafe. So a lot of community groups are coming together to do the Music on Mills concert series. The first one will be this Saturday, which will be after the Off Pike Market. Off Pike Market is 3 to 7, and then the music is 6 to 9. So hope folks can come out for that. Should be really phenomenal. And
Thank you.
that might be everything.
Yes, that is it. Anything else under? Oh,
I was
there's
going to
more?
invite Councilwoman Bowling to talk about the Pride event that we're working on.
Sure, I would love to. So we have had some sort of informal celebrations of Pride and acknowledgements of Pride, and I know that the D&I board headed up having a flag raising at City Hall last year, which was fantastic. And this year we are working on a more formalized event. So now that we have permits in, I feel I can share the date and time. Things are a little more solid. June 1st on Mills and Montgomery in front of Victory Park, we will have the first Norwood Pride Market. It is from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. There will be a flag raising at City Hall first, and then we will march over. There are vendors as well as some information booths from local organizations like the library and some nonprofits. We will have food and entertainment and all sorts of fun things, so I encourage everyone to come out. We are also working on providing free pride flags for local Norwood businesses for the month of June. They are borrowing them. They will have to return them so that we can continue to do this every year. But if there are any Norwood businesses who are interested, I encourage them to reach out to myself or to Susan, and we can get them a pride flag to display for the month of June.
Thank you. Anything else under unfinished business? All right. New business. Mrs. Franzen.
Sure. Just wanted to let folks know if you have babies, children, toddlers, I think up to 5 years of age, or if you are expecting, Baby Bear is going to be happening again this next Tuesday, the 21st, from 5 to 7 at 2037 Cortland Avenue. The Norwood Police Association will be providing a taco bar for all attendees, and this is not anything where you have to be only a certain income. It's for any people that have children. You get free diapers, clothing, toys, a variety of other things, resources if you need resources for childcare, and a free dinner. So if you have any little ones, I will be there this time, getting some free stuff. Kids grow all the time. This is a great way to get some new clothes for them. And the only restriction is that you have to live in Norwood. So be sure to bring some ID if it's your first time. Sometimes they have you sign up. Sometimes it's just come when you can. So you can check on their Facebook page to see which one of those will happen this time. Yeah, and as Susan said, Off Pike Market is this Saturday from 3 to 7. I'll be there with a booth. Don't let that keep you away, though. There's plenty of other booths. You don't even have to look at mine if you don't want to. It does have honey and jam, peach jam, hopefully some strawberry jam, and some cross stitch. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you. Any other new business? I will add one thing to piggyback off the Music on Mills. I believe there are 2 of the establishments in Factory 52 who are doing summer concert series. One on Wednesdays and one will be on Fridays, which will increase some traffic in that area on those days, which will also to draw everyone's attention or bring your attention to the fact that there is a new stop sign in place on Beach heading northbound towards well, towards the clock tower, right there at Beach and
Towards Park, yeah.
All right. Any other new business? Okay. Moving on to communications. First item, this was actually moved from the previous council meeting, and that was the Trex permit for Birdie's Coffee Company. Mr. Moore, I didn't know if there was any more comment you wanted to provide on this, or what action you are looking for from council.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not really looking for anything from council. I can't, the building department has an objection, clearly. I don't know if council wants to make a finding that this will encourage economic development or not. Council could just receive and file and leave it pending, and if anything does happen, then it could be brought back at that point. I'm not sure what council wants to do. Council may want to, yes, this will absolutely encourage economic development. We're going to approve it, and we'll leave it up to the building department to figure out the zoning. But those are kind of the options at this point.
Mrs. Hoover?
I have a question, which I don't know who I would ask it to, which is, he has all the answers. My question is, could we reach out to Mr. Ventura to find out? One of the questions was about communicating with the neighbors. I didn't know if that was something that was typically done in this sort of situation. If this is, that's my question. If we could reach out to the owner.
Mr. Moore?
I don't see a reason why any member of council couldn't, if they were interested, reach out to the property owner or the owner of Birdie's or the law firm to inquire about that. There's no requirement that they contact neighbors. And sometimes we've had them come through that kind of the landlord didn't know and nobody in the city knew until the letter came to the clerk of council, so.
Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't have any issues with making a motion to receive and file with no objections. Anybody wants to second it?
Motion by Mr. Braden to receive and file with no objections. Is there a second? Mr. Garten?
Just for clarity, if we do that, it would bypass the building department's.
No, sir. No, sir.
Mr. Moore?
Thank you, Mr. President. Now we can, unlike other, just so everybody's clear, unlike the standard liquor license where we get it, and if we don't like it, we have to object. The city has to approve. The city has to make a finding that this will encourage economic development. And so I would treat a motion to receive and file without objection as receiving and filing, but not making not approving it. Just, okay, we got it. And that's where we are right now. And that's the way I would treat it, if that's what council wanted to do.
Thank you. So the motion by Mr. Braden is to receive and file with no objection. Mrs. Hoover?
I'm sorry, I have a follow-up question for Mr. Moore. So then what would happen after that? It would go back to the building department and it would be for them to negotiate?
Mr. Moore?
Thank you, Mr. President. At this point, I don't think the building department would reach out to them. The onus would be on the owner to try to figure out what it is the city needs in order to approve the tracks and to get the zoning approved.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So again, the motion on the floor by Mr. Braden is to receive and file with no objection.
Yeah.
Is there a second? Mrs. Hoover?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Hoover. Any discussion? Mrs. Franzen?
So at least for me, I don't have strong feelings either way. I would honestly be fine with just accepting this. I think from my view, this is a pretty clear example of something that is going to encourage economic development in the city. It's adding basically more hours for a new business that is really, really popular. But if other people are more comfortable waiting for the building department to get their objections taken, I'm not going to, I'm not going to die on this hill. But I didn't know if anyone else had any thoughts about this.
Mr. Garden?
I reflect Councilwoman Franklin's statement. It seems like this is a no-brainer to allow this for birdies. They seem like they've been good neighbors. The alcohol use in this is going to be a neighborly use. I guess I'm concerned about other people getting the same treatment. If that seems to be sticky, but I don't have a problem with this specific incident.
Ms. Royce?
Would Mr. Braden be open to so we just need to accept and make the finding that it aids economic development to approve it, essentially?
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
So I guess my question would be, does Mr. Braden want to? Because I'm assuming you want to approve it by saying no objections.
Is that through the
Sorry.
president?
Yeah, sorry, through the president.
Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me like we're all
Yeah,
agreement.
I think we
Somebody second the motion and let's get it passed.
I think we need to change the wording of it.
Mr. Moore?
Why is that?
Mr. Moore?
Thank you, Mr. President. So in order for me to feel comfortable signing this and sending it in, I need something from council to receive and file and make a finding that this encourages economic development to approve the tracks transfer.
So, to respond, Mr. President?
Mr. Braden?
Thank you. So no objections? That doesn't do that?
Mr. Moore?
No, it would not. This is not the typical liquor license.
So,
Mr.
Mr.
I absolutely would approve it, yeah.
Mr. Braden?
Absolutely.
Would you amend your motion to receive and file and make a finding that this encourages economic development?
Okay. That's not how I would word it, but I will agree with that.
Okay.
Thank you. Mrs. Hoover, will you amend your second?
Yes.
So, the amended motion on the floor is to receive and file the letter and make a finding that this encourages economic development. Any further discussion? Mrs. Franz?
Just want to say thank you to Mr. Moore, because this is a little different than the typical ones we got. I was also slightly confused about the best way to do this, so I'm glad. It seems like we're all on the same page as far as thinking this is fine, so I'm glad that we got there eventually with some help.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Motion on the floor is to receive and file the letter and make a finding that this encourages economic development. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce? I will vote yes. Mrs. Bowling? Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Girton?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Moving on to the next communication. That is a letter from Mayor Victor Schneider regarding Mayor's Court's fines for April 2024.
I don't need to read that.
Yes.
Mr. Joseph S. Gears, President, members of Norwood City Council, regarding Mayor's Court fines. Dear Mr. President and council members, enclosed, please find the report for Norwood Mayor's Court for the month of April 2024. Should you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. Sincerely, Victor Schneider, Mayor of Norwood.
Thank you. Mrs. Bowling.
I move to receive and file as read.
Motion by Mrs. Bowling to receive and file the letter. Is there a second? Mrs. Winterbauer.
I second.
Seconded by Mrs. Winterbauer. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce? I vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Girton?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. We have no absent members. Is there a motion to adjourn? Mr. Girton.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Girton to adjourn. Is there a second? Mrs. Bowling.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Bowling. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce, I'll vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Girton?
Yes.
Mr. Brand?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes. Motion carries. This meeting is hereby adjourned.
I wasn't trying to boss you.